The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and sleepless nights, a place where joy and fear lived side by side. Nurses moved quickly, their soft shoes whispering against the polished floor, while behind closed doors new lives were beginning and old grudges were quietly growing sharper. In one of the maternity rooms, a young woman lay pale and exhausted, her hands still trembling from the effort of childbirth. She had become a mother only hours earlier, yet there was no sense of peace around her. Instead, tension pressed down on the room like a heavy blanket, all because of the woman standing near the door with her arms crossed and her lips tight with disapproval. The mother-in-law had arrived unannounced, her face rigid with judgment rather than concern. From the moment she stepped inside, she made it clear that the birth of her grandchild had not softened her heart. Her eyes scanned the room critically, lingering on the tired face of her daughter-in-law with thinly veiled contempt. Words began to spill from her mouth, sharp and relentless, accusing the young woman of weakness, of embarrassment, of bringing shame rather than pride. Each sentence cut deeper than the last, echoing cruelly against the sterile walls. "You don't belong here," the older woman snapped, her voice rising despite the hospital setting. "You think this makes you important? Don't fool yourself." The young mother tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her body. Her eyes filled with tears, not just from physical exhaustion but from the weight of humiliation. She clutched the blanket around herself as if it could shield her from the verbal blows raining down upon her. The mother-in-law took a step closer, lowering her voice to a cold whisper that somehow felt louder than a shout. She spoke of family honor, of mistakes that could never be erased, of how the young woman had ruined her son's life. Then came the final command, delivered without hesitation. She demanded that the daughter-in-law leave the hospital immediately, as if she were an unwanted guest rather than a woman who had just given birth. The cruelty of the moment seemed almost unreal, and even the machines beside the bed hummed nervously, as though aware of the injustice unfolding. The young woman's lips trembled as she tried to respond, but no words came. She felt abandoned, crushed by the realization that the place meant for healing had become another battlefield. Nurses hovered uncertainly outside, sensing something was wrong but unsure whether to intervene. The mother-in-law straightened her coat, convinced of her own authority, ready to walk out after delivering what she believed was a final verdict. Then, without warning, the door opened. The sudden movement drew everyone's attention. A tall figure stepped into the room, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. He carried himself with quiet confidence, his eyes sharp but calm, as if he had seen storms far worse than this. For a split second, the mother-in-law froze, clearly unprepared for an audience. Recognition dawned on her face, followed by disbelief. The surprised guest was someone she never expected to see there, someone whose voice carried weight and whose silence alone demanded respect. He looked first at the young mother, then at the older woman, and in that brief exchange, everything changed. The room fell silent, so quiet that even breathing seemed too loud. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, controlled, and impossible to ignore. He questioned the mother-in-law's behavior with a calm that made her earlier rage look childish. He reminded her where she was, what had just happened, and what kind of strength it truly took to bring a life into the world. The words that followed struck like lightning. "You're rushing to the wrong station," he said, his gaze unwavering. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It was not shouted, not dramatic, yet it landed with devastating force. In that moment, it became clear that the mother-in-law's journey of cruelty and control was leading nowhere worth reaching. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but no sound came out. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Her face drained of color as she realized she was no longer in control of the narrative. The authority she thought she possessed crumbled under the weight of truth spoken plainly. Nurses stepped forward now, emboldened by the shift in power, while the young mother felt a fragile sense of relief wash over her. Someone had finally stood between her and the storm. The older woman turned away, defeated, her earlier confidence replaced by stunned silence. She left the room without another word, the echo of her footsteps fading down the hallway. In her absence, the tension slowly dissolved. The surprised guest moved closer to the bed, offering reassurance not with grand gestures but with presence and respect. The young woman let out a shaky breath, tears slipping down her cheeks, this time not from despair but from gratitude. Elsewhere, in a completely different world yet somehow connected by the same themes of power and confrontation, another clash was unfolding under bright studio lights. A popular late-night talk show audience buzzed with anticipation as a well-known host welcomed a celebrated actor to the stage. Smiles were exchanged, jokes delivered, and applause filled the room. But beneath the surface, tension simmered, waiting for the wrong question, the wrong tone, the wrong moment to ignite. As the conversation turned more personal, the atmosphere shifted. The host pressed harder, steering the discussion into uncomfortable territory. The actor's smile tightened, his patience visibly thinning. What was meant to be entertaining banter began to feel like an interrogation. The audience laughed nervously, sensing that something was off. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of irritation, every clenched jaw. The breaking point came suddenly. A remark crossed the line, and the actor's composure snapped. He spoke up, his voice firm, making it clear that respect was not optional. The host attempted to brush it off with humor, but the damage was done. The exchange grew heated, words overlapping, tension crackling through the studio like electricity. Finally, the actor stood up. The movement alone silenced the room. Without shouting, without theatrics, he made his stance clear. This was not a performance, it was a boundary. Security approached, unsure of what would happen next, while the audience watched in stunned silence. Moments later, he was escorted off the stage, the cameras cutting away as the host tried to regain control. In both places, so different yet strangely alike, one truth emerged clearly. Whether in a hospital room or under television lights, respect matters. Power does not belong to those who shout the loudest or dominate the room, but to those who speak truth with clarity and refuse to accept humiliation as entertainment or tradition. Silence, when forced upon cruelty, can be louder than any argument. And sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected presence to change everything. The maternity ward was supposed to be a place of quiet hope, where the first cries of newborns softened even the hardest hearts. Pale morning light filtered through tall windows, casting gentle shadows on the walls, while the rhythmic beeping of monitors marked the fragile balance between exhaustion and life. In one room, however, warmth had been replaced by a sharp, suffocating tension. A young woman lay in her bed, her body aching, her mind still drifting between pain and disbelief that the long night was finally over. She had survived childbirth, yet she was about to face something far more cruel than physical pain. Her mother-in-law stood at the foot of the bed, posture stiff, eyes cold. She did not look at the sleeping baby, did not ask how the birth had gone, did not offer a single word of comfort. Instead, she launched into accusations as if she had rehearsed them for years. Each sentence was loaded with resentment, each pause filled with judgment. She spoke of disappointment, of expectations that had not been met, of a family name that, in her mind, had been dragged through the mud. The young mother tried to respond, but her throat tightened. She had imagined this moment so differently. She had dreamed of holding her child while hearing words of pride and support. Instead, she felt stripped of dignity, reduced to a problem that needed to be removed. When the mother-in-law demanded that she leave the hospital immediately, the room seemed to tilt. Leave. With stitches still fresh, with her body barely able to move, with her newborn only hours old. The command was so heartless that it felt unreal. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances outside the door, torn between protocol and compassion. The older woman's voice grew louder, sharper, echoing down the corridor despite repeated requests to lower her tone. She framed her cruelty as discipline, her rejection as moral superiority. To her, power came from control, from reminding others of their place. The young mother's eyes filled with tears as she stared at the ceiling, willing herself not to break. Then footsteps approached, steady and deliberate. The door opened, and a presence entered the room that immediately changed the air. The newcomer did not raise his voice or rush forward. He simply stood there, taking in the scene, his expression unreadable. The mother-in-law turned, irritation flashing across her face before recognition hit her. Surprise froze her mid-sentence. She had not expected anyone like him to witness this moment, let alone intervene. He asked a simple question, his tone calm but firm, cutting through the noise like a blade. Why was there shouting in a maternity ward? Why was a woman who had just given birth being treated like an intruder? The mother-in-law tried to assert herself, but her words sounded hollow now, stripped of their earlier authority. He listened without interrupting, then responded with a quiet clarity that left no room for argument. "You're rushing to the wrong station," he said, meeting her gaze. The phrase was not an insult, yet it carried undeniable weight. It suggested that all her anger, all her need for dominance, was taking her somewhere empty and wrong. The room fell silent. The mother-in-law opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, she had been confronted without hostility, and it left her powerless. The nurses stepped in gently but decisively, asking the older woman to leave. She complied, stunned, her earlier fire reduced to ash. As the door closed behind her, the young mother finally allowed herself to cry openly. The unexpected guest approached the bed, offering words of reassurance and reminding her that strength did not need to be loud to be real. In that moment, the hospital room reclaimed its purpose as a place of healing. Across the world, under the glare of studio lights, a different confrontation was unfolding. A late-night talk show set buzzed with energy as the audience cheered for a beloved actor making a highly anticipated appearance. The host greeted him with a smile, jokes flew back and forth, and the mood felt playful. Yet as the interview progressed, the tone shifted. Questions became more pointed, humor edged toward provocation, and the actor's relaxed posture stiffened. The host pressed on sensitive topics, framing them as harmless curiosity. The actor attempted to deflect with grace at first, but irritation flickered in his eyes. The laughter from the audience grew uncertain, caught between amusement and discomfort. Cameras captured every moment, magnifying the tension. What should have been a light-hearted exchange began to feel like a test of endurance. Then a comment crossed the line. The actor's response was immediate and unmistakable. He spoke clearly, setting boundaries, explaining that respect mattered more than ratings or laughs. The host tried to recover with a joke, but the moment had passed. The actor stood up, the movement sending a ripple of shock through the studio. Security hesitated, unsure whether to step in, while the audience fell silent. Within seconds, the situation escalated. Voices overlapped, the host insisting it was all in good fun, the actor refusing to back down. Finally, the decision was made to escort him off the set. As he walked away, there was no dramatic gesture, no shouted farewell, just a quiet refusal to participate in something he felt was wrong. The cameras cut to the host, who scrambled to fill the silence with nervous humor. Both confrontations, though worlds apart, revealed the same truth. Power dynamics shift the moment someone refuses to accept humiliation. In the hospital, silence fell on cruelty when it was exposed for what it was. On television, entertainment lost its shine when respect was demanded. In each case, someone chose dignity over submission, clarity over chaos. The young mother would remember that day not only as the birth of her child but as the moment she learned she was not alone. The actor would leave the studio knowing that walking away was sometimes stronger than staying. And the mother-in-law, silenced at last, would be forced to face the emptiness of authority built on fear. In life's most intense moments, it is often the unexpected voice, calm and unwavering, that changes everything.